Hello, my name is Doug Guthrie, and I'm here with my team, the On Global Leadership team, to talk about doing business in today's China. This is a really complicated topic, and it's a topic that everybody who's going to be talking to you about it over the next several sessions is very passionate about. We've committed our lives to gaining a deep understanding of China's economic development and how to effectively do business there. And we're going to divide it up in a number of different sessions. In this very brief introductory video, I'm going to spend a brief amount of time talking about the team. And then we're also going to talk about our philosophy for how to teach about doing business in China, and then give you a sense of what the agenda is for this course. So without further ado, I will jump right in here. Let me say a little bit about On Global Leadership. The On Global Leadership mission is to be a premier institution on thought leadership, research, teaching, and advisory in key areas that shape the global political economy. As I mentioned, everybody on this course has devoted their lives to thinking about China. Two of us grew up in the United States and then became devoted to China and devoted to thinking about economic development in China. And the other two members of the team are native Chinese. And so we're going to spend time talking about these issues. In addition to thinking about China and developing thought leadership on China, we also spend a lot of time thinking about not just advisory work, but also education, executive education and thought leadership that ties into how to help individuals and organizations think through the complexities that are China in the world today. So doing business in today's China, it's a complex topic. It's also probably one of the key topics in the business world today. China is not only the world's largest economy, or second largest economy, and soon to be largest economy. It's the world's most populous nation, or maybe it's just recently been surpassed by India. But it's certainly a major player, both as a consumer market, but it is also the home of the most sophisticated manufacturing supply chain in the world. All of us bring experience, both in terms of research, but also in terms of advising and working with companies that are trying to navigate this complex landscape. And we've seen it evolve from the 1980s up to where it is today. It's also an important thing to think about this background is to really understand the deep history of China and how that history actually influences the way people think, today's culture, what it means to do business and navigating that history and culture. It's important to think about China's geopolitical landscape, where it sits in the world. But in addition to where it sits in the world, one of the things we emphasize in our work has to do with, it's a mistake to think that China is just a monolithic geopolitical landscape. We also often just think of China as this unified system that's represented by Beijing. And of course, the politics there are very important. But China is also a very decentralized system that has a very interesting and unique balance between the plans that come out of the center and the ways in which local governments, provinces and municipalities and townships are incentivized to think of economic development. In our own writing, the OGL team, we borrow Andy Walder's phrase, local governments as industrial firms. And we think often about what each different locality does in contributing to China's economic development and growth. But this is also a very important political moment. There's US-China relations, but there's China's relation to the Middle East, China's relations to Central Asia. All of this is crucial for how we think about economic development in China and therefore doing business in China. And as I mentioned, the manufacturing supply chain and the consumer markets are very, very important here. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about China's political economy and what that means for doing business there. I'm going to let the others on the team introduce themselves in a minute, but I'll just give you a little background on me. I grew up as a China scholar. In some ways, it started out as a bit of an accident. I was an undergraduate at the University of Chicago, and I was studying economics and thinking I was going to go work at a consulting firm somewhere. And as my language requirement, I took Mandarin, and I fell in love. I fell in love with the language. I fell in love with the culture and history. I took a year off from school and went to live in Taiwan, so I could study the language, immersed in the culture and around people who spoke Mandarin day in and day out. And came back and decided, yeah, this economics thing, I'm gonna actually just go and be a Chinese literature and history major. And I developed along that path, but as I got out of college, I started to think about how important the economic reforms were and what was happening in China in the late 1980s and the early 1990s when I graduated from college. So I went off and got a PhD in economic sociology at the University of California, Berkeley, and became a Chinese professor, a professor of Chinese sociology. My first job was at NYU. I spent a good amount of time there, but slowly I gravitated from just the social sciences to thinking about the business school world. I became a professor of business at NYU. I ran executive education there for a while. I was a dean of a business school for a while at the George Washington University School of Business. And then I left academia for some time and spent about 5 years as the head of Apple University in China, which was a very, very fun and interesting job because not only did I get to do the teaching of leadership development and how to build good teams, and how to think strategically, but also got an opportunity to, advise an incredibly important company and an incredibly important partner of China for what Apple was doing in China and how it was managing its position in the world's most important manufacturing supply chain. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I came back and now I'm a professor of global leadership at the Thunderbird School of Global Management. I'm also the executive director of China initiatives there. And around that time, some colleagues of mine, Sarah Kellogg and David Slocum, we started this company called On Global Leadership, where we think about these issues deeply. It was a very, very interesting moment for me, and I would feel so fortunate to be a part of this team that includes Dexiao Chen, Chris Gao, and Diane Long, because as we were starting this company, COVID hit. And so my identity as a China scholar is so closely tied to being what we would call a boots on the ground observer. We don't just read statistics, but we actually get out there and talk to people. And suddenly I was in a situation where I didn't know when I was going to get back to China. And I've been so fortunate to know this team, the team of Xanadu Enterprises, for a very long time. I first worked with Diane, I think in 1994, when I was first living in China. And the friendship and relationship with these business people and scholars has just grown tremendously over the years. And so when COVID hit and we were trying to figure out what the OGL boots on the ground initiative was going to continue to be, this team I was just so thankful that they joined us in our work. And so we make up the China portion of the OGL offerings. Let me talk very briefly about the philosophy of this course. There are really 3 key things that I want to emphasize here. One is all of us believe that you cannot understand China and you cannot effectively do business in China unless you think deeply about culture and history. It happens often when I'm giving lectures to executives and I start talking about Chinese history that goes back thousands of years. Some people start to roll their eyes and say, why do we need to talk about this? We're interested in doing business today. And my answer is, you can't really understand China unless you understand its deep history and its culture. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but we are going to emphasize it. We're going to spend a little time in the beginning in the next video, but we're also going to constantly reference back to it because this is a really important part of understanding China. We also like to think of China's political economy. We do not come from the Milton Friedman School of Economics, where you just free the markets and let markets decide what's going to happen. Actually, China's political economic development has been a very complex and a very purposive process, and it's led to a very, very, very vital economy. China is, we believe, going to be the largest economy in the world in the next decade. And this is not by chance. It's not simply a deep, cheap labor pool that has led to this. It's because there has been very purposive development over the course of the last 40 years. And we're going to spend a little time talking about that. And then the third part of our philosophy of teaching is to really bring forward what we call real world and boots on the ground examples. And so boots on the ground means, we have a China team there. I've spent a good part of my career living in and out of China, but I haven't been able to travel there recently as much as I would like. But we have a team there. Dashelle, Diane, and Chris are just, China is their lives and they live there. And so they can give us real world examples of all the things we're looking at as they exist for people's lives today. But we also give a lot of examples. There's a lot of work with different companies that this team has worked with. I've worked with Apple. Diana's worked with Adidas and Liz Claiborne. Dashelle and Chris have worked with Home Depot. Dashelle's worked with Sears. There's a lot of really good examples, and we've advised a number of different companies. And so we're going to bring those examples to the fore. So culture and history is important. The political economy is important. Real world examples are important. The agenda for this course is we're going to spend a little time talking about brief history, and then we're going to talk about the political economy. We're going to talk about China's manufacturing power and how important partnerships are in China. We're going to talk about China's innovation economy and the consumer ecosystem, technology and society in China, and China going global. And then we're going to talk about some of the tensions that have emerged over the last couple of years, the trade wars and COVID-19. And we're, of course, going to also talk about some of the geopolitical issues, which include Taiwan. And then we're going to give you our summary. So that's the agenda for what it is that we want to bring to you over the next 10 sessions. And we hope you love it. We hope you have a really good experience. We have set this up so that it can be done all asynchronously, but there may be opportunities with certain groups that will mix the asynchronous piece of it with synchronous interaction with this team. So let me go now to the China team and have them introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to a brief history of China. Thank you.